Welcome again. Thanks for making time, like I said, on a Friday afternoon. I'm super thrilled to have Meena Ganesh with us here. In a minute, I'll introduce her and then we'll get into the fireside chat that I know a lot of you are looking forward to. There's a Q&A feature on the platform. Like I said, this is a new platform for all of us, and we're super thrilled to bring this event to you virtually. As part of this, as you can see, there's a tab that shows Q&A. Any questions you have for Meena, if you can type that, it'll get it to us, and then we'll be able to answer the question. So again, thanks for joining. Let me introduce Meena before we have her. I'm super thrilled, like I said, to have her just because of how such an inspirational journey she's had. As a chairperson, Meena heads Portia Medical, India's largest and fastest growing home healthcare company, which she co-founded in July 2013. The company has 4,500 plus employees and operations across 40 cities in India, and brings in-home to patients the full range of geriatric care, chronic post-operative care, as well as allied healthcare services. Till February 2013, she was a promoter and a board member of Tutor Vista and CEO and MD of Pearson Education Services, which was acquired by Pearson for $213 million. And this is all before the word EdTech and everything that we know about came about, right? So that's how much she's had visibility into that particular field. Not only that, earlier in her career, she co-founded one of India's pioneering BPO companies, Customer Asset, which she sold to ICICI OneSource. During her 5-year association with Microsoft India, she set up multiple business units for them, including Microsoft Consulting's Internet and Application Development Business Services units. Apart from all of this, she's also a partner of the platform growthstory.in, where she's a co-promoter of a dozen new age internet or tech-enabled startup companies, some of which are leaders in their category. They're all familiar names for you guys: BigBasket.com, HomeLane, Fresh Menu, and Bluestone. She also serves on the board of Pfizer India, P&G Health and Hygiene Limited, and Axis Bank. She has served on the board of governors for IIM Kolkata as well. Now you know why I said I was super privileged to have a chance to converse with Meena, right? So again, welcome, Meena. Just in terms of tradition at LinkedIn, after we do the introduction, we also ask folks, what's one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile?
Thank you, Malai, for the very kind introduction. There are two things actually, not just one. So one is on the, I have a foundation that I started during the time when COVID was pretty hectic. And the primary purpose of the foundation, which is called Bahar, meaning spring, is to create livelihoods in the healthcare space. And I'm super proud that we've just recently rolled out these about 50 people are getting trained across 3 or 4 different extremely rural, some tribal areas, that they're being trained to become community healthcare experts and entrepreneurs. They become entrepreneurs also. They earn their livelihood through that.
That's
awesome. The second is I'm a very, very recent bridge player. I've just learned bridge.
Oh, really?
During COVID. So
Wow. Okay, I don't know about the second one, but I'll have to put a plug in on the first one. If it's not on your profile, you should add it to your profile. That is a big part of, I think giving back is such a big part. And, we have the ability in your profile to add that as well. So that's super thrilling. The other one that I do, which I'll probably, pass on, is we also ask people to showcase their talent. Maybe I'll pass on that, right? Like, people sing, do magic tricks, a bunch of those. But anyway, again, Meena, thank you so much for making time. Like I said, I've, followed your journey, super thrilled to just see, right? And as I mentioned to you before, this time it's not just, the women in tech we've brought about, but also the allies as well. And so as we get into our discussion, we'll definitely talk about what role allies have to play as well. To get started, right, I would like to make it a little bit more lighter and talk about some rapid fire questions, if you're cool with it. Very short answers, 1 or a few words. Sounds good?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks for playing along. So are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Okay. Books or podcasts?
Books and podcasts.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. But
okay,
the 2-word answer.
No worries. That's okay. Yeah. I mean, like 1 or a few words is good. One trait you look for when hiring a new person?
Adaptability.
Adaptability. Awesome. Favorite travel destination?
My home in Kunur, near Uti.
Awesome. Yeah. Favorite place of mine too. Awesome. Favorite author, because you said books?
I have so many. It's very difficult. But book I'll name, which is on my mind a lot these days. It's Mindset by Carol Isbeck.
Oh wow! I have it.
You have it?
I know people may think we talked about it, but I literally, if you can see it here, I know. I promised to the audience. Yes. I promised to the audience that Meena and I definitely did not talk about it, but it's just coincidental. So, yeah. Thank you. Awesome. How do you unwind?
Bridge is one, and then music as well. I'm early learner of Carnatic music also. So those are two things.
Awesome. What is the most used mobile app? What do you use the most?
Gosh, unfortunately, is WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
And not LinkedIn. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
No, we want you to be a user, but I think I am a user. I do understand that the WhatsApp use case is a lot more than the LinkedIn use case, right? So I totally understand that. Best career advice you've received?
Don't look at your job description as a box. Think of it as just a starting point from which you branch out and do what you think is really appropriate and right for the company and for you.
Wow, wise words. Last rapid fire question. Education versus experience. Which one would you consider more relevant?
Experience.
Always. Nice. Awesome. Thanks for that, Meena. I like I said, right, like a little bit of warm up. I thought like there's a few topics that I thought would be really relevant for this audience, right? Me included. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to this chat. Is in terms of what I have looked at, like your journey, and said, like, what is it that we can learn from, right, from an aspirational perspective? Because at LinkedIn too, we have this thing called as next play, and that next play is not just within the company. In fact, like our founder Reid Hoffman wrote a book where he says that at LinkedIn, we consider our jobs more as tour of duty, right? And for this tour of duty, here is what, like, the company and you have an agreement on. Company will benefit, but you'll also have a benefit, right? And then the next one can be within the company or maybe even outside, right? So it's important to actually look at that. And even for the folks that have joined us today, to look at like a long-term horizon and think about what they want to do, right? And I know that I've heard you talk when somebody referred you as a serial entrepreneur, that you referred more as you'd prefer to be as a parallel entrepreneur. So I'll reword my question and say, what's the most rewarding aspect of being a parallel entrepreneur?
So for me, over the last so many years, 22 years that I've been an entrepreneur, I've gone across multiple different sectors, starting from BPO to education to grocery delivery, home healthcare. And in each of them, the whole excitement is to create something which did not exist. When I started my first company in the BPO space, we were one of the first 3 companies in India which started BPO, including trying to figure out how to lay lease lines and how to hire people, how to train them on English spoken the right way, spoken the American way. So we had to literally create every piece of the whole industry. And of course, now if you look back, the industry is massive. And that's the case with each of the different spaces that I worked on. So for me, the biggest thrill is that there's something completely disrupting an industry, a whole new capability that is made available to people. A lot of new jobs get created. That's what excites me most about entrepreneurship.
Awesome. I mean, especially as you talked about and just knowing your background, healthcare on one side, like BPO on the other side, right? Like, online grocery, like, home solutions, whether it's like home lane and so on and so forth. I mean, as I look at some of this, right, one of the questions that I have is, you must have had a lot of chances where you had to make a hard choice, right? Like, what would you say, like, maybe one or a few hardest choices you've had to make and the impact it's had on your career?
So as an entrepreneur, there are plenty of hard choices that you have to make continuously. And some of those choices you make to keep the company alive. Some of those choices are divesting the company because it's better served elsewhere. These are tough choices, and you do what is right for the company, you do what is right for the people. May not be always something that you want to do or what you're looking forward to doing. When I started my first company, Customer Asset, there was after the period, we were off to a good start, but then 9/11 happened and the whole world came to a standstill. So suddenly there was no business, there was no money, there was nothing. And we were just about to close our next round of funding when all of this happened. So there was no money in the bank either. So yeah, so we had some interesting moments, very tough choices to be made. But what I've always found is when, even if you're doing difficult things, which may not be what people like, if you are able to openly and honestly share why and what you're doing, they do come along with you. And that's what happened in customer asset. And in the future also, whenever we've had difficult choices, difficult decisions to make, being open and honest as to the cause and what the best that you have done, in spite of which that those decisions have to be taken, people do get along with you.
Okay. Awesome. The transparency part of it, right? The employees appreciate it all the time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, this is a topic, like I said, right? I hope that, sometime in the future, we don't have to talk about like, being a woman leader as separate from being a leader, right? But, we have to acknowledge where we are. There's still work to be done. So this is a question that stems from that, right? Because I've also heard you talk, or maybe I read something you'd written, Meena, about in your early days, you being the only woman in a room of men, right? Like when
Yes.
especially at a leadership level. So the question is, what drives you as a woman leader, right? Especially where in India, in a country like India, right? Social and professional ecosystems may sometimes be stronger barrier to success when compared to your male counterparts. So yeah, thoughts on that?
So this was even more prevalent and much more stark when I started my career. Like you rightly said, in the late 80s and 90s, there were no women in any of the meeting that I used to go for, whether internal or external. There used to be very, very few women present in that. Also, there were, while I had a supportive family, I couldn't say the same thing for the environment. The clients that we met, I used to work for a company called NIIT, and I was doing IT consulting to a lot of corporates of different shapes and sizes, some of them being real old age manufacturing entities, or even some government departments, etc. And they would treat women very poorly, including not having a bathroom separate for the women, starting from something as basic to really looking down and to not really acknowledging that you can and you do have the capability. But so that's the reason why I talk about that contrast to what we have today is that things have changed drastically. Most companies, corporates do provide a much more even play field for the women, girls and women to come in and stay and work. And they do understand that all of us, and not just women, but all men and women, need to bring our full self. We are not just automatons who come and work for 8 hours or 9 hours and go. We are human beings which have a lot of pushes and pulls at various points in time, and that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be supported, both whether it is physical health related, mental health related, family related. We need to be there for the people, because then you get the best out of them. So that's something that that the change is so palpable, and that was one of the reasons why I brought this change out. Now, especially in the early days, I think it was super important for me to do more than what was expected always, so that I could stand out and be visible. But also within my own family and my friends and the circle of supporters, to make sure that everybody understood that this was very important for me. I am here to build a career. I really need your support. I'm okay to ask for help. I have, especially when I had small children, I would not hesitate to ask help from anybody. I never felt that I had to be a superwoman. I had to do whatever best and bring my whole self to work. At all points in time, I used to make sure that everybody was aware that I have children. They are part of my life. I need to make space for them. I will be away for certain times, and if they are sick or whatever. But I'm doing more than what you can possibly expect from me anyway. So I'm an extremely valuable person for you. So, but now, was to remove from my mind any kind of guilt, which a lot of women, especially those in the with younger families, they carry a lot on themselves. That are we doing enough? Are we doing the right things? Are we neglecting one at the cost of the other? And to them, I would always go back and say that first you shed your guilt and you be comfortable with yourself and you be true to yourself and your desires and your potentials. Then the rest of the world and the universe will conspire to support you. If you keep second guessing yourself, how do you expect anyone else to go out of their way to support you? So that's the first, be your biggest friend and your biggest ally. So speaking of your word on the ally, I think we need to be our allies first before we are looking for allies outside. I think we miss a lot of that. A lot of women really struggle with this.
Wow, a lot there, Meena. In fact, uh, something that hits close personal to home for me is we have two kids. My wife actually is in a career and she's on a break right now, right? A lot of thoughts in terms of how to navigate these times. So this is like super, like I said, just super inspirational hearing from you, especially the ally part, right? I had not heard it before, that be an ally for yourself first, right? And then you can look for allies from the outside. Just pretty powerful. Thanks for sharing that. One thing, just to double click on what you said, right? So you contrasted how bad it was actually for women then and
Yes.
now, right? A lot of things have improved, right? Especially in the current scenario. But what are still things that you think that probably women are at a disadvantage compared to their male counterparts?
So I think there's a lot that's happened in the corporate sector, but in the startup ecosystem, I still feel that we are very far behind in terms of having diversity, both from a societal perspective. Now it's expected that women will have career, maybe they take breaks, whatever, but they will, it's very likely, especially in the urban centers, that they will be well educated and they will have a career. But the assumption is that that career will be smooth sailing, so that they are able to manage their whole life. Being an entrepreneur is rarely ever smooth sailing. There's a lot of ups and downs and it's a roller coaster ride. So how does the society step up and help women who are interested in doing this to fulfill their potential also? Let's not create such a huge burden on them to have the smooth sailing life so that they can manage everything. Why not the others in the family support them so that they can go and conquer the world and build these fantastic businesses that are waiting to be built? So that's one part which is at the societal level. The other is that the space of the investors. We find that the diversity there is poor. The number of women investors, whether partners or leaders of investing of VCP companies, that are so few and far between. I think that automatically creates a degree of perhaps divide, I would say, rather than conscious bias, but there is a divide. And I do believe that it's like if there are women leaders, they tend to hire more women. It's a known fact. I'm sure studies show that as well. And likewise, if there are women investors, they would probably be more open to getting more women on board as their portfolio companies. So these are some of the problems. I think there are still
work to be done.
There's a great lot of work to be done.
Yeah, awesome. The more people like you talk, I think it'll help all of us be more aware of it, right? Like being aware is the first thing. So awesome, thanks. We talked briefly about allies, but just in your life, right? How have allies played a positive role in your success?
Yeah. So I first and foremost look close home. So my husband is my biggest ally. My parents, when they were alive, and my mother-in-law, they've always been my allies and have always stepped in to provide whatever help I need at any point in time. And but just looking beyond the immediate circle, in most organizations where I know that I have thrived, I know that there have been people who have supported me. And those organizations where I did not enjoy the time that I spent over there, I knew for a fact that there was no obvious ally. There was no obvious person who's looking out for me and guiding me and just giving me the little nudge and saying, go this way rather than this. It might ease your path. I'll just give you a very interesting example of after my first startup customer asset, before I started Tutor Vista, I was with a company called Tesco, which is UK's largest retailer. And they had appointed me as a CEO to set up their entire back office and tech center in India. And it was a supremely hard task to begin with, because this was at the company Tesco had never ever outsourced anything outside of that Hertfordshire place where they are based. All their buildings are close by and all the work used to happen there. Nothing was ever moved out of that place, Hertfordshire, leave alone to a third party or to a part of the same organization to another country, of course, is completely unthinkable.
Yes.
So I had a lot of pushback from senior leaders in the parent organization in London, where they really did not want this to succeed. And there was some very smart, so the way the company had set up this whole program was very interesting. So I ran the India business. My job was to go into UK and identify what needs to be moved, work with people to move it. And then they created this quote unquote program management team in UK. But actually, while they were doing program management, there were some very senior folks there who were extremely well networked in the organization, both from a HR perspective and also from a process perspective. They knew who to go to for what and who should be influenced to get what done. And if something is not moving, how do you bring it up to the senior leaders in the board or whatever, so that you can so that they could smooth the path for me. So they actually engineered an allied team, a team of allies, so that I could be successful. So I thought that was an interesting example to share.
Awesome. No, thank you. Like you said, it starts from home, but even at work, there's just in different ways there are allyship roles that people can play, right?
But let me just add one more thing. I have grown up children, and they are my allies now. They are amazing. My children teach me new things. There's new technologies or some completely new ways of working that are emerging globally. So they are my
awesome. I know that there are actually moms and dads in the crowd as well. I have heard this from you, Meena, before, but there's an incident about your son writing a letter to you, right? Maybe you can share that, just because you brought up your kids as a topic.
Yeah. So at the end of school graduation, all the children had to. So my son studies in IIT Madras now. He's just graduating this year. So when he was completing school, the last 2 years, obviously, and I'm sure you come from a similar institution or the one that you know how challenging it is to get into these. And the poor fellow had to work day and night for the last 2 years and always there. And I was on his back a bit. And I never knew whether I was doing too much or too little. Should I be pushing him more so that he doesn't have regrets? Or should I leave him to set the pace? It was always a huge challenge. How do you know you're doing the right thing? So I used to be, I did my best. And, I said that I also told him, it's okay. I mean, you get into IIT, great. You don't get into IIT, there are 100 other things. It really doesn't matter. I don't care. I mean, we are doing it only because you want to. I don't want you to join IIT. I don't care where you study. So I was very, very categorical. So a very interesting letter that he wrote after school when he graduated, and he, of course, knew by then that he's going to join IIT Madras. The letter he wrote was very nice because he spoke about this challenge that I was facing. He said, I know you tried hard. You tried to keep balancing. Sometimes you're pushing and you don't know whether you pushed me too hard. But I think while you may have pushed me too hard at times, but overall, I think it was, you hit the balance. Okay. So thank you, Mom. It's okay.
That is just awesome.
Great reinforcement. Okay, you didn't screw up. Okay.
Exactly. As a parent of two, something that I always think about. So that one, because you brought up your kids, I remember, hearing that before, and that's a good one. Thanks for sharing that. Moving on to leadership traits, right? Everyone has their opinion on this. This is just more thoughts that I want to hear, especially with respect to the hybrid world, right? What specific traits do you believe a leader should possess that is critical in driving their teams to success? Especially, like I said, right? Let's put a spin on it based on the hybrid world.
Yeah. See, first and foremost, as a leader, you need to be very clear and articulate on what is the objective that you're trying to achieve. What is the problem that you're solving, or what is the company you're building, or whatever is the passion that you need to communicate that clearly. You have to communicate it again and again. You have to communicate it triple harder because of so much of work from home, where people meeting people and looking into them, into their eyes, and they're seeing your body language and really believing what you say. So you have to repeat that so many times, and also through your action. So you're not just talking about your passion, but your values that has to be seen in action again and again. So that's one big part that I very strongly believe in. A leader set the standard, set the goal, showcase through action, so that people believe you, and they see that you're consistent to whatever you've said time and again, irrespective of difficult times or good times. The second piece as a leader that I believe is very important is to build the right team. Make sure that you build really good quality people around you who can question you, who are not scared of questioning you. And that's even more challenging when if there's a young team, they sometimes can be, and for a person like me with a young team, they tend to be a little overwhelmed by the fact that I'm so senior or so many things I've done. So they hesitate to question or ask. So how do you create that kind of an environment that, irrespective of age or experience or what you've done before or what role you're playing, you don't hesitate to make your points and your views known, so that overall as a company we can move forward, or as a business we can deliver what is important for the customer, especially those people. For instance, I've ridden behind my physiotherapist on his two-wheeler when he's going to go give a therapy to a patient, because I just want to watch, and then when I'm chatting with him I get to know. And those kind of, if I can create those kind of real close connects which are not restricted by the hierarchy, then what I get out of that is amazing. Third is, be open to change, be open to learning. You don't know everything. You probably don't know anything. Okay, you just set the whole goal and said, "Oh, now let's figure out what to do." So better hear from others, learn, change. That's so the growth mindset comes back there. Constantly reinvent yourself, because otherwise somebody else will.
That's awesome. When you said learning, the reason I smiled is, for me, it is a learning moment as well, right? Like, especially in the last few years, as we stepped into the hybrid world, we were thinking that, like new hires coming in, right? Like they probably need to rub shoulders with folks in the office, and that's the only way they can learn. So how do we find ways for them, right? And I was proven wrong, right? We have so many folks that were like, fresh out of college, being remote. I probably related to my age when I started, like, oh, you needed to ask someone if you didn't know anything. Now these folks have access to all types of information, right? So again, just being open to unlearn, right? I think unlearning is the toughest part. Then the learning part is like sometimes as leaders, right? Like, even though it's not just number of years of experience, you've done something, it's worked really well for you, and you just like stick to that, right? Just be open to unlearning and then learning, right? So that's definitely a big part of how we're looking at it. Even something that just shared from a LinkedIn perspective, we're running some programs to make sure that managers and leaders know how to run hybrid teams, right? Because the culture part is really difficult, right? Like, it's not like, I'm sure at some point we'll all get used to having culture the same way for remote teams as well, but we used to associate culture with being in the office, the energy level and the passion, the excitement. Now, when everyone is on VC, how do you bring that same level of energy and make sure your culture is getting across there as well, right? So those are things that definitely as leaders we're grappling with, and I'm hoping that we all learn from each other as we go through this, right? Moving on, right, a little bit on your entrepreneurship journey specifically, right? Like failures, right? I mean, we talk about, in the tech world, we talk about like putting an MVP out there, like failing fast and learning from it and so on and so forth, right? But just when I look at your entrepreneurship journey, how do you navigate failures, especially as an entrepreneur, right? Like consider there are not too many safety nets, right? I mean, like you're the ones that's holding it together. So when failure stares you in the face, like how do you get through those situations?
Yeah. No, so you're right that as a startup entrepreneur, it is possible that things don't work your way. Probably, it's not possible. Probable. It's likely that things will not work the way that you thought of it to start with. In fact, there is what we believe is that you need 3 times the amount of money that you think you need to build something, 3 times the amount of time, and 3 times the amount of effort to do it than what you thought. So always you'll be proven wrong. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. So first and foremost, to acknowledge that you are not a superpower and you will make mistakes. And probably what your assessment of the market or the situation is very different. So that's one. Second, again, in this context, don't hesitate to change or pivot if you think that the market is saying so to you. Don't get so stuck to your guns saying that somehow, I will doggedly make it work. Because while you may be able to doggedly make it work, but is that the best outcome? Maybe there's something better, larger, more appropriate, more valuable that you can create if only you were willing to look in a slightly different angle. So that is something that's a very important thing that I would say. Third is build allies, like you rightly said. Build allies of your investors. Don't consider your investors as your, if not enemies or people on the other side of the table. They are actually on your side of the table because both of you, or you along with all of them, are trying to build something valuable for everybody. So try and make sure that you use them as allies rather than as people who you report to and who you just provide the minimum information to keep them at bay. So use those as allies. Look for people outside, subject matter experts or others who've been there, done that, other startup founders who may have succeeded, failed, whatsoever. But most importantly, I think mental strength is super important, because there will be failures, and sometimes you may be a success, sometimes you may be a failure, sometimes your company may be a failure. You have to learn how to deal with all of that, because all of those are possibilities. It's not just because somebody is great that a company succeeds. It's a combination of many things. It's a timing, it's a bit of luck, it's the right investor that came in. Of course, a lot contributed, but what you do. But in spite of that, in spite of your best efforts, if you don't succeed, that's fine. Get up, dust yourself, and go on and do something else, or do more of the same, whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, if it doesn't work out, that's fine. There are other things that you'll find that's good. That's great. Just as you talked about, right? Like a lot of these things, even at work, right? Like one is on the entrepreneurship journey. Even if you pitch an idea at work, right? It's a lot about like, I'm passionate about this idea, right? And so just kind of straddling those two things, right? Like passion versus profession. Your thoughts, just when you hear that.
Well, I will ask a clarificatory question. What do you mean by profession?
in a tech company like where we work, right? Like being an engineer, let's say it's your profession, right? And passion is, let's say it's an idea that you're passionate about, right? Like, do you again, in some cases, like I said, right, within our company, we actually say, hey, you know what, it's a product, we can do it. Sure, right? Like that's something that's born at LinkedIn. It becomes part of our product platform. In some cases, it's like maybe it's outside, right? You have to step outside. But in terms of just when you look at saying, hey, passion versus profession, how do you like marry those, right? I mean, if it intersects, great, right? Like
absolutely. What do you do if it doesn't? Yeah. I know. So the profession has to pay your bills, and you have to eat. So don't scoff on that. That is something super important. Make sure that you develop that. Make sure that you water that, and it really successful, and a part of you which is important, and that you enjoy as well to the extent possible. Now, if you do have a passion which you're not able to fulfill at that point in time, can you develop it on the side? Can you bring some of that into what you're doing, if possible, if the situation permits? If not, can you keep it germinating it slowly over a period of time on the side? Maybe there'll be another time when it becomes really right for you. Maybe your circumstances are such you can't drop everything and say, okay, I want to become a DJ because I'm passionate. Maybe you can't. Okay, you have to do something to pay the bills. Maybe that time will also come. So, but don't kill your passion in the name of profession.
That's actually awesome. That's awesome, right? Like the keep it like a side gig and keep it going until you probably find the right thing is actually a really great takeaway. By the way, on the topic of DJs, we have some really awesome DJs at LinkedIn. They're employees. But when we throw events, these folks do a great job being
excellent.
So let me move to one question that I had, and I see some questions coming in from the audience as well. So we'll make sure we have enough time for that. One question is just on the inclusivity of from a product perspective, right? Like at LinkedIn, just before this, the opening talk, I was mentioning that the last couple of years have taught us multiple things, right, on the product platform to say, you know, creators, right? Like they want to actually express it down themselves in terms of video portfolios. It's not just the resume text type stuff going on, right? And then outside of that, like people want to have career breaks that they want to list, right? Accessibility is a big part of it, right? Like, so the inclusion part, we've launched a platform in Hindi, a number of things, but where I'm going with this is, you know, you're taught in terms of how do you be inclusive in product development, right? And how crucial is that to you, right? Especially if I look at Portia recently, right? When you started that, I don't think this is out there like in the market, right? Like, especially with an aging population, at some time in the future, I felt like you always started the journey much earlier than when everybody saw the market, right? So being inclusive, right? I mean, just you starting that itself, in my opinion, was you try to address a market that probably was not being inclusive and others that were being offering. So I don't know if that's something that's very conscious in your mind when you think about like inclusivity in product development, so that like we can learn from that.
Yeah. So there are two takes on this. One is if there is a target audience or there's a target market that you're looking at. First and foremost, to be inclusive of all shades and shapes of the target market, I believe that it's important that the team that you have comes with a diverse mindset also. You can't serve an audience that you're not connected with, or you don't understand well enough or intimately enough. So can you create a mirror of the target market that you're serving within your organization, so that you understand the pain points of that really well? Now, the moment you do that, then newer and newer shades come in. For instance, since you talk about Potia, initially we started with catering to a certain kind of audience. But as we got more people into the organization who had senior citizens at home, who needed a lot of support, who had parents who had different kinds of ailments, and we realized, okay, that seems like a really big problem waiting to be solved. There's a lot of dementia that we saw in amongst people in the 70s and 80s. Even amongst our employee base, they're taking time off to support them. Said, okay, clearly there seems to be a problem, so let's create a solution for that. So the moment you start to mirror the market that you wish to serve and then listen to it carefully, I guess inclusivity starts to come into your product in that fashion.
That's awesome. I think, you know, I'm sure you would have seen this as well. Like in a couple of years ago, I saw a number of research articles saying that, you know, if you have a diverse team, the product that you put out there is a lot better than, you know, if you have a non-diverse team, right? So I think just like, you know, even from a talent acquisition perspective, or even like the growth of our existing talent, just making sure that we are able to reflect a diverse workforce, I think always reflects on the product. And that's a great example that you shared, right? So let me move on to a question I got from the audience, and that is, you spoke about learning being core to your journey, right? How do you stay relevant in constantly changing ecosystems?
I want to ask you the same question. Please, can someone tutor me on what is going on in this world with Meta, with crypto, with stable coins? God only knows, you know. No, but so jokes apart,
yeah.
There's a great deal of reading that is required. So the moment I got into the healthcare space in 2013, from then the amount of reading that I have done and the curiosity that I have in every conversation with a medical professional to ask 3 additional questions. Even if I am sick and I'm getting treated, I will ask 3 extra questions because I'm just curious, how does this whole thing work? So that is one thing that's important. If there is a specific domain that you're working in, how do you go really deep into that through your own studying, through curiosity, through working with other professionals and practitioners in that space. So, but beyond that, there is the space of change in technology is just incredible. I mean, you blink your eye and something new is coming. And there, for me, being connected with the younger generation who are more LinkedIn, who are more aware of what's going on and are more native to some of these changes is super important. So constantly connecting with them and asking them questions, understanding from them, that's an approach that I try to use.
That's awesome. You know, the learning part, like you said, right? Like, you know, when you ask the question, very similar, right? Like making sure you find time, because I know that sometimes when I have conversations with team members, they're like, hey, where do I go find time, right? That's because if you don't consider learning as part of being up to date in the profession, you've already lost out. right? So if you think that's an extra thing I need to do, then you've lost it, right? That should be an integral part of how you stay relevant, especially in this tech world, right? So making sure you allocate time to, like, do any type of learning, right? Now, like I said, it's at the click of a button on your phone, podcasts, books. There's a lot of different sources of information, but just staying abreast of whatever is relevant to you is of absolute importance. And as you talked about staying connected with the younger generation, I know my little one has started taking more pride in teaching me some features on apps that she uses that I don't, right? And she has this beaming smile when she knows that, oh, you didn't know that type of a smile, right? So yeah, definitely making sure that we take advantage of the next generation that's so much more quicker than us in learning, right?
Sure.
The next one, is basically your experience. That's the comment that's coming, right? You said experience is something you'd go with any time in comparison to education. Any specific reason for that?
Well, it's not that I'm not a fan of education. Obviously, I have had the privilege, and I have made sure that my children also have had the privilege and have taken advantage of that. But my point is that education is only a start of a journey. What I look for really when I say experience is how people have used whatever they've entered the portals, and through whatever means. And I found people with different kinds of educational backgrounds reaching different levels because of the kind of effort they've made during their career to absorb, to learn, to do more than what was expected of them. And in doing so, that the experience that they gain is very, very rich. Of course, it's good to have a good education. It helps you get inside and get into the place at the right level and all of that. But that does not guarantee anything. What guarantees is your attitude towards the experience that you are going to build once you've gotten into a career.
That's great. Something that if I remember right, you'd mentioned sometime that I'd listened to about making sure early in your career you get, whether it's corporate or otherwise, right, get some success under your belt, right? Like maybe that's something relevant to this question as well, to be able to say that, wherever it is, right, before, it doesn't mean that you directly start a startup, but I remember you mentioning that whatever it is, get some success under your belt, because that'll give you the confidence and that builds on your experience, right? So that's kind of I think you were getting at. So sure. Great. I think from an education perspective, right, it's definitely like you said, right, it's not like say no to it, but once you get that, what you do with that is anyway experience. And so right, the next question, right, is a little longer. Let me read it out, right? Like recently people are considering getting higher education from abroad after burnout in the pandemic. What is your take on it? Do you think getting higher degrees, especially in the field of tech, is worth, especially where it's clear that skills matter a lot in this domain, and there are lots of online courses available which are providing same at low cost, right? This I'd say that especially your role and growth story, right, and seeing all these founders come through, right? Like with respect to that, if you can just shine some light on this question in terms of the advanced degrees, right, and what you see there.
See, I think there is a need, very, very critical need to learn continuously, because like I said earlier, the pace of change, especially the technology world, is just incredible. And if you don't make an effort, you can get left behind. Now, whether that necessarily means that you have to go and do another degree or not depends a lot on what your situation is. If you need to make a pivot in your career, or you need a big jump, and that can only come if you have a degree from a place which is going to be valued, yes. But if not, the learning on the job, learning through courses, through online courses, is something which is highly viable now, because there are really good programs available, and you rather make it a habit to keep learning than to wait for that fantastic degree that's going to change your life. It may or may not. So is it really worth taking that risk? Is a question that you may need to ask basis your circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I've heard recently is, some of the big schools, especially on the management side, when people have gone, right, it's really not just what you learn there, right, but it's the network that you develop in these schools and so on and so forth. But now with a lot of these networks like being more democratic and information being available, it's really a good question to ponder about, right? Previously, whereas it might have been a slam dunk relatively in terms of decision making. Say, if you want that, you go get this. Now you have to really ask much deeper questions as to what you plan to achieve, right? I mean, one thing that I know I told my friends, when I stepped away for the masters, is they were like, comparing like, oh, even if you do don't do your masters, you'd probably, get paid whatever you will after that. Is for me, from a personality perspective, I felt like getting another degree would actually make me a better person and a better professional. And that's really what drove it, rather than actually the calm difference that happens after that, right? So asking deeper questions is probably what I think, I would also add to what you just mentioned, right? And let me see if we have more questions. I have one more which is one advice, because I think navigating careers is actually something that's come up, right? So one advice to your audience on navigating careers, right? Like, moving from company to company, role to role, staying in the same role, taking on different types of roles, like, your thoughts on that in terms of, just navigating.
Malai, I must say I'm super dated. Okay, you don't want to take my advice on how to build a career in the corporate.
Something, maybe I'll share something, Meena, and you can share like a different perspective on that, right? Like something that I heard, actually, not firsthand, secondhand, to someone who actually attended a WIT conference in the Bay Area, that told me this, and it stuck with me in mind. There's a leader at Google, I think, that I have shared about spidering versus laddering, right? Like, in terms of saying that, hey, what, there's ways certain folks, grow in their careers, which is, hey, I join, let's say, as a site reliability engineer. I do a good job. I get promoted. Like, I become a SRE manager, director, leader. I run the site for the company, right? And that's like, what's called as laddering in that term, right? And spidering is like, moving around, right? Like different, not just companies, even within the company, taking multiple roles, because once you get to the top, you have a kind of a better bird's eye view, rather than actually a kind of a monolithic view, right? So a little bit of like, saying that, have you like, consciously looked at that? Or let's say companies that you run, right? Like, how do you look at talent and say, hey, you find someone who's great at what they do, and then they come in and you make sure that you leverage their skills? Or are you thinking, even like as a leader of these companies, right? Multiple companies that you've said like, what, hey, moving people around is a better way of developing next generation leaders, right? So that's kind of what I had in mind in terms of the question of navigating careers, right? Like, how do you think, maybe you want to become a specialist, or maybe you want to become a all-rounder leader type stuff?
So there are two parts to it. Depends on what kind of a journey that the person wants to take. If you're getting into a journey where you want to become a leader, run businesses, run teams, whatever, then perhaps having a broader range of capabilities would help you. Because like you said, as you go senior, you need to have the capability to manage whatever is there under your purview. But if you're looking at a tech career, in my view, and if you want to remain a specialist, you need to probably spider, but a little differently. Spidering from a technology perspective. Don't get too stuck with one type of technology or one kind of capability, because things are changing so quickly. You find a way to spider so that you're keeping relevant in the technology field with whatever new is coming up. But you still remain a specialist. You're not trying to learn finance and marketing and sales and so on, so you can become a CEO. Even in tech, I don't know whether just going super deep and specializing in one area is even meaningful anymore, given how fast things are changing. For all you know, all the bits that you were doing will now be done by a robot. Then what are you left with? Okay, so you better learn how to do something else as well.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. A lot of what we're doing. In fact, we are making our own jobs redundant in some cases, right? That's kind of the field we are in. So yeah, there's one final question with which I think we can wrap up. We have 5 more minutes. This might be something that I'm sure you would have heard many times, but I think it's really more from your experience that I think the audience is interested in hearing. Is any tips for working women, how to balance work and life?
Okay. Well, I would say that in my mind, it's always been something which flows. Work and life have to be intertwined, and they flow. You cannot box one as work and the other as life. It never works. It never is that way. The only way you can do that is to first and foremost make peace with yourself that you are okay with all your, or whatever, your your family or your kids or your husband transferable job or your mother-in-law you have to look after. With all of that, you're good and you're fine. And you're a person which brings all of that, plus a whole bunch of other capabilities. And it's really the merger of this which you take to the table. Do not try to hide or overcompensate for what you think are your frailties or the challenges you have. But if you're able to bring the whole of it together and then really do your best so that you can deliver what is expected of you, then you're likely to feel more settled in what you do. If you're constantly trying to hide or to overcompensate, you will burn out because you'll never be able to do that. But if everybody knows that you're a combination of all of this and you're doing your best and the deliverables are there to see, it's easier to have a more long-term career rather than a burnout when you say, okay, I've had enough. I just cannot handle so many things which I'm trying to do so well in everything. You can't. You need to be authentic. You need to be able to put it out and say, I'm a combination of all this, like me like this, or don't like me. But this is what I am.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meena. I think with that, we are coming to wrap. I know you're probably a couple of minutes, but I know people have other things starting at 4, so maybe give them a break as well. Thank you, Meena. I'll take some time to process all of this, but maybe 3 things that stand out to me, there'll probably be like, taglines I'll take away from our discussion is be your first ally, right? Be curious. And the last thing that you said, like, bring your whole self to work and put the best out there and don't hide anything, right? Like this is who you are type stuff, right? So just great nuggets. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, right? Like, just we're thrilled to have you as part of this. I'm sure the audience loved it. I'm getting feedback already that it's been great. So again, thanks for your time. And I hope the audience enjoyed the conversation as well. Thank you so much.